Your triceps are probably one of the most important muscles for you to grow if you want to look big and if you want to look jacked. They are literally 2/3 of your arm. So if you don't know how to train them properly, if you don't know how to apply the right principles to get them to grow, you're not going to be looking the way that you want to look. So let's start off by just saying this is what I used to look like. This was the size of that my arms used to be. I believe they were I think they were about 11, 12 inches, right? They were small. Now, obviously you can see a few years later, my arms are significantly bigger. I couldn't tell you the exact size they are, but as you can see, there is a big difference. So this is Triceps Growth 101. I'm going to be showing you everything that I know, everything that you need to know in order to be able to get bigger triceps so that you can maximize your jacked look without taking steroids, without hopping on anything. There's no secrets. It's just about understanding the right principles when it comes to building your triceps. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into the shit. So hypertrophy fundamentals. This is so important because we can go into all the nuances of building muscle, but if we don't understand the base, our base level of building muscle, then we're just no matter what stuff we add, we're not going to be changing anything, and we're not going to be being able to grow muscle. So first off, a calorie surplus. This is super important because if you're not giving your body the excess energy it needs to be able to build muscle, then you're not going to be able to build muscle. 7 to 9 hours each night. This is non-negotiable. Your muscle is built during your sleep, so if you're not sleeping as much as you need to be, then your training's going to suffer, your hormones going to be dysregulated, and you're just not going to be optimizing the amount of muscle growth that you would normally have. High protein diet, this is standard, 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. You need to be having protein in your diet, otherwise you're not going to be in a consistent state of muscle protein synthesis, so this is really important. Training with a close proximity to failure. This is needed when it comes to building muscle. It's important for you to be getting close to that failure threshold in order to be able to stimulate the growth stimulus. 2 times per week frequency. This is really important if you're wanting to maximize the amount of growth potential. And then lastly, we've got mind muscle connection. If you're not feeling your muscle during the exercises, then you are not going to be stimulating it. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into the shit. So we're going to be going over the anatomy of the muscle, the functions of the muscle, the biomechanics and the resistance profiles of it, and suggested exercises that we can do to grow our triceps. So the anatomy of our triceps. You've got the long head, which will attach at the shoulder joint. We've got the lateral head, which is responsible for, that nice horseshoe look that everyone goes for. And then we've got the medial head that it's actually quite hard to see because it runs underneath both of them. But typically, if we can look on someone's tricep, it's kind of this outer bit at the bottom, closer towards where the elbow is. So it's really important for us to know what the muscle actually looks like, where it's attached, because I find knowing the anatomy of the muscle actually enables for better mind-muscle connection, because you can really think about how your body is functioning when you're performing exercises. So this is what it looks like on someone who's jacked. Obviously, you're not going to be taking steroids, but it gives a really nice visual representation of what the muscles actually look like. So we can see we've got the long head here, we've got the lateral head here, and we've got this little bit down here, which is the medial head of the tricep. So it's really important to just kind of get an understanding of what we're working with, what the muscle looks like, and then we're going to move on to the functions. So there are 2 functions to your triceps. These are elbow extension and shoulder extension. A massive fundamental when it comes to bodybuilding and building muscle is, unlike powerlifting or just getting strong, we're not training movements or movement patterns like a squat, a bench, or a deadlift. But instead, what we do is we train the functions of the muscles we're trying to get bigger. So in order for us to be able to maximally grow our muscles, it's really crucial that we understand what these functions are. Because if we don't know what these functions are, it's like we're going on a mission without having a map. You need the map to know where the fuck you're going. So this is why it's really important, and we're going to run it through. So elbow extension, it's simply this: moving your palm and your hand and your forearm away from your body. So obviously we've got flexion here. This is what your biceps are responsible for, perhaps like in a curl or something. And then we've got extension. This is what the triceps are responsible for. It's super simple. Get it locked in, get it understood, because this is the whole crux of how we're going to be training our triceps. So elbow extension, all 3 of your head, the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head, are responsible for elbow extension. So when you're performing any exercise involving elbow extension, you're going to be working all 3 heads. Shoulder extension. Only your long head is involved in shoulder extension. This is because, as we can see here, it's connected to the shoulder joint. Therefore, it plays a role in shoulder extension, okay? But one thing we do need to know is we don't need to train this movement to grow your triceps, especially your long head, because typically your back muscles are going to do a better job at performing this role. The long head of the tricep, typically it performs more of like a supporting role. It kind of helps. So for example, when you're performing, let's say like a lat pullover, a lot of guys will say, damn, I really feel my tricep. There's a reason why you can feel your tricep. It's because your tricep is involved in this type of movement. So obviously if you're doing a pullover, don't get stressed. But it's just really important that we know this kind of stuff. So the biomechanics and the resistance profile. In its simplest form, to train your triceps, you need to pick exercises where the line of resistance wants to put your arm into elbow flexion. So it's simply, the line of force is trying to push your forearm up. So obviously think about like a bicep curl, you want the resistance to be going that way, okay? So this is a good example. So we've got the resistance, it's pushing against, this is your forearm, obviously that's your head, that's your humerus, okay? The force you are producing is from your tricep, and you're trying to go into elbow extension against the resistance. So obviously this isn't anything like a push down or anything, just where you're trying to fully extend your arm. So obviously screenshot this, understand this, because this is super crucial when it comes to understanding what exercises we need to apply in order to be able to get the most growth that we want. So exercise selection, this is a really important thing that a lot of guys actually misunderstand. You need one exercise to train through the length and range, you need one exercise to train through the mid range, and then we need one exercise to train through the shorten range. A lot of guys end up fucking this up and they end up performing way too many. The main thing is where loads of guys do different versions of a push down, right? So they'll do maybe a single arm push down, then they'll do a close grip, and then they'll do an easy bar. But what a lot of guys end up doing is they end up performing the same exercise in the same range multiple times, and you end up running into something called exercise redundancy, where you've basically faced diminishing returns, which is where the effort you're putting in is yielding less and less results. So it's really important that we understand what exercises we do so we can avoid this kind of redundancy. So the length and position, basically any overhead tricep extension, any exercise where your arm is overhead like this. This is because by putting your shoulder into full flexion, it fully stretches your long head, meaning it trains it in its stretched position. So I'm going to leave a link in the description, but this study here, and there's been numerous other studies, show that training certain muscles within their length and ranges is actually better for growing them. So when we look at and understand the function of the long head of the tricep, the long head is obviously responsible for shoulder extension, right? If we put our shoulder into flexion, it's doing the opposite of contracting, which is stretching, right? So if we stretch the muscle and then we perform any extension overhead, we're getting a really good stretch in our long head. And this is going to be one of the main exercises for really building the meat of our tricep. The long head is 2/3 of your tricep, and your tricep is 2/3 of your arm. So that's around 44%. Your long head is nearly 50% of your entire arm. So if you're not doing any overhead extension work, you're really not going to be maximizing the amount of growth that you could be potentially having. So this is really important. Make sure you get in an overhead tricep extension if you want to maximize the amount of growth you're going to be getting. Obviously, this is going to be targeting the long head mainly, so it's really it's a crucial thing that you shouldn't overlook. So what I do is just go for a cable setup, and preferably do it single arm, because this gives you better range of motion and better mind muscle connection. So what a lot of guys will do is they'll do it with both arms, whether it be on a cable or with a dumbbell. But what I find is that they're actually missing out on the top portion of the movement where they're getting a contraction. Whereas if you do it single arm, you're really able to focus on the function. So one crucial error that I notice a lot of guys make is they end up going too heavy with both arms, and then they end up really missing out on some of the important factors when it comes to actually building muscle, which is obviously doing the function properly without involving any other muscles. So as we can look here with this chap, what a lot of guys will making the mistake, not saying this guy does it, but what a lot of guys will do is they'll pick a weight which is too heavy, and then they'll kind of be jerking their body, and they'll just be trying to move the weight for the moving the weight's sake. And the massive issue with this is that they're not really going to be targeting the muscle in the best way possible. The more mind-muscle connection you have, the more muscle fibers you're going to be able to activate, because you're going to be able to actually use the muscle within its intended function, okay? So when we do a single arm overhead extension, we're really able to focus on how the muscle feels when it's performing the exercise against the resistance. You're able to feel the force it's producing, and because of this, it's going to enable us to stimulate and target the muscle in a more sufficient way. And naturally, better range of motion, this is really important, because when you're doing it with two arms, you're not able, for the most part, you're not able to fully extend your elbow, and you want to be taking your muscles through a full range of motion, because if you're not going to be maximizing their entire potential. So next, for your shortened, any push down, it doesn't really matter. Personally, I enjoy doing a single arm. The reason why is because I've mentioned previously, you get better mind-muscle connection because of it, and you're able to control it more, and I find that I get more of a growth stimulus from doing it single arm. You just want to make sure you don't turn these type of exercises into a press. So as an example, some guys end up turning a tricep pushdown into like a lower pec exercise. So you see, for example, right, where dudes are, when they go too heavy, and then they're just trying to move the weight for moving the weight's sake. And what happens is they end up bringing their humerus down to the midline of their body. And your tricep isn't responsible for moving for shoulder adduction, right? So shoulder adduction is just moving your humerus into your body. That's what your pec is responsible for. So when you go too heavy on an exercise like this, instead of just performing elbow flexion, which is what your triceps are responsible for, they end up just trying to move the weight, and as a result, they get their front delt involved, they get their pecs involved, and they turn it into a compound movement rather than an isolation movement. So don't do this shit when you're doing cable pushdowns. If you can't perform elbow extension, then the weight is too heavy. When it comes to bodybuilding, yes, we need to be strong enough, but it's really important that we pick a weight that we can perform the intended function of the muscle, because if we aren't doing so, then we're not going to be maximizing the stimulus on the muscle we're trying to grow, and we're just wasting time in the gym. So, little side rant, pick a fucking weight that isn't too heavy, because if you do pick a weight that's too heavy, you're not going to be stimulating the muscle in the best way possible. So for mid-length, this is one thing that a lot of guys actually miss out on. They end up kind of neglecting it, and they don't really think about it that much. The mid-length is good because it enables you to overload your muscle a lot better. So compared to the overhead extensions or shortened position, it's tricky for you to get really strong in these type of movements. And when it comes to building muscle, you want exercises that you can really easily get strong at, because then you're obviously going to be stretching your muscle up more. So for training your mid-length, any close grip press, it doesn't really matter. JM press, a close grip Smith, a close grip bench, tricep dips, neutral grip bench presses. These are all great. They will build your triceps, and you can get easily strong on these. Personally, I have an issue with the JM press. So it's not a bad exercise. I just think that pronation makes it hard to tuck your tuck your shoulders and your elbows in. So the most optimal way to activate your tricep is through neutral pressing. So I'm going to explain it to you here. Trying to tuck your elbow in when you've got a fully pronated wrist is really, really hard, because I'm not able to, if I want to completely hold a bar like that, I have to flare my elbow a little bit. And the problem with that is that you will end up getting more pec activation when you perform a movement, compared to if you did a neutral grip. You can really tuck your arm and your elbow in, meaning you could just focus on shoulder extension. So obviously, I'm not saying this exercise is bad. If you enjoy doing this exercise, it's important we just do exercises that we enjoy. But if we're trying to be the most optimal with it, and we're trying to maximize the amount of gains that we can get and our genetic potential, I would say you should consider neutral pressing. So what I would suggest is either you do dips or you do a Swiss bar. Personally, I have been running the Swiss bar, and I found that it's really, really good at stimulating your triceps. You just need to know how to kind of set it up more so. I was doing dips for a period of time, but the reason why I switched away from dips is I find they're actually better at activating my lower pecs So I was doing these 4 days a week, and I just found that it was too much. So I switched that for that. This is a really good exercise. Obviously, if your gym doesn't have one, then you can't do the exercise. Okay, but like a close grip press with a Smith machine with a pronated grip, it still works. But this exercise here is just the most optimal thing possible. Okay, so your triceps can handle a beating. I do 4 sets on a neutral grip press, 3 sets on my lengthened exercise, and then 2 to 3 sets on my shortened. Two times a week. So this is nearly 20 sets per week. Naturally, depending on how long you've been training for, here's some parameters. These are not, by the book kind of things. These are just what I would suggest. You don't have to follow these. Everyone is different. But, if you're in your first year of training, 0 to 10 sets, maybe even less. 1 to 3 years, 10 to 12 sets. 3 to 5 years, 12 to 16 sets. And then 5+ years, 14 to 20 sets. Assuming you are in a surplus. Listen, you don't obviously need to follow these. These are just parameters that I would say work. But you just need to kind of listen to your body. If your body says you need to do more, do more. If your body says you need to do less, do less. You just need to play around and iterate and find what works for you. A lot of the time, a lot of guys end up failing, and they end up trying to listen to what different people are saying. But what you need to understand is we're all different. Our bodies all function differently. So it's really important you figure out what works for you. These are just guidelines. So remember, you need to train close to failure in order to grow. So 0 to 3 reps in reserve. You need to feel your muscle. Mind-muscle connection is the number one thing. If you're not feeling your muscle, you're probably not going to be doing shit for it. I'm going to keep it real. Do not sacrifice feeling your tricep at the sake of trying to be stronger, okay? Progressive overload is important, but a way to progressively overload is by doing the exercise better. Okay, so the more you can feel your tricep, the more you're going to be stimulating it. And feeling is more important than anything else. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you found it useful. I hope you feel more aligned, and I hope it gives you all the information that you need in order to be able to grow your triceps in the most effective way possible. If you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe for the algorithm. Send it to someone who you think may need it, and I will catch you in the next one.